The Morrison-ross-Kemp model of instructional design goes by many names, including MRK, and in honor of the original design creator, the Kemp model. This model was first created in 1985 by Jerry Kemp. Gary Morrison, Stephen Ross, and most recently Howard Kallman have contributed to the development of the MRK model. Although the MRK model doesn't dictate the order or sequence of design events, you should begin any new project by first asking whether or not instruction is the right solution. If the answer is yes, then the instructional design process may begin. For the purposes of this instruction, we are going to look at each of the 9 inner elements of the MRK model, beginning with instructional problems and working our way clockwise. Remember when I said that you should not begin an instructional design project without first asking whether or not instruction is the right solution? You can look for the answer to this question by conducting a needs assessment, by doing a goal analysis, or by completing a performance assessment. These types of activities can help you narrow down the problem and to clarify the goals for instruction. For example, as graduate students, we are faced with an abundance of new information about our chosen field, and a needs analysis conducted by faculty has determined that instruction is needed so that we can learn about various ID models and theories. In the next element of the MRK model, we analyze the learners and the context in which the instruction will take place. In my example, you are the learners. The learning context is online, with learners interacting asynchronously. Collectively, the class has a similar context in that instruction and communication is taking place on the internet through sites like eCourseware and Google+. Individually, the learners in our class have diverse general characteristics such as age, gender, ethnicity, and even geographic location. However, the learners also have a diversity of technical skills, professional backgrounds, personal and social characteristics, and even different personal learning style preferences. These types of learner characteristics are common learner-related considerations that should be made in relation to the goals of the instructional design project. A task analysis will help you to define the content, knowledge, and procedures that you should include in the instruction to help learners meet the stated objectives. You may conduct topic, procedural, or critical incidents analyses. As a result, you will identify specific information that should be included in the instructional unit. True to the MRK model, a task analysis can take place before or after setting instructional objectives, or as a simultaneous step. A task analysis following the MRK model of design might result in an organizer such as this. Our example is to provide instruction about the MRK model to a group of instructional design students. The instruction should include information about the model itself, including its processes, overview, history, and key persons of the model, and an explanation of how it is different from other models. Notice that we're not concerned in this step with the order of information, just that we have the major content identified. In the MRK model of design, objectives provide a framework for developing the evaluation processes, but they also serve you by providing a clear direction for the selection and sequencing of instructional material and activities. The MRK model does not mandate one particular style for writing instructional objectives. Rather, they explain the pros and cons of popular styles and sum it up this way. Instructional objectives state the specific measurable outcomes that learners are to achieve as a result of their engagement with instruction. Looking back at our example, I have determined that the instructional objectives for this unit are to recall and explain 5 or more elements of the MRK design model, compare and contrast the MRK model to the ID model they presented, and evaluate the usefulness of the MRK design model. Like following the steps to a dance, content sequencing in the MRK model means that we are arranging the instructional content into the most appropriate pattern for the learner's achievement of objectives. There are several content sequencing strategies to choose from, including ordering by real-world events, by relationships to other concepts, or by the interests of the learner. Returning once again to our example, the flow of information in our instructional video has been sequenced in a relationship to a hierarchy. So far, we've looked briefly at the key contributors and history of the MRK model, considered how it is different than other models, and now we're spending the majority of our time learning about the key elements. The purpose of the instructional strategy is to determine the best way to present information in a way to support achievement of the objectives. In order to create effective and efficient instruction that produces reliable results, you should consider various research-based heuristics and then modify and refine as necessary. Morrison and his colleagues call this approach a prescription, in that you are trying to pair the best possible instructional method with a particular type of content. Given the asynchronous nature of this course and considering that technology is a key part of our graduate program, the best instructional approach to teaching the MRK design model to you is video. Visual depictions and audio explanation provide an ideal means for peer-to-peer instruction. The next element in the MRK model is designing the message. In other words, you need to create a plan for how instructional content is going to be presented to your learners. Designing the message is a natural next step after identifying instructional strategies, but the two are distinct steps in the MRK model. This step is all about layout and graphic design, much like the analogy of arranging type in a newspaper or a magazine. Hopefully by now you've noticed some repetitive patterns throughout this short video. Beginning with the overview, the visual MRK model has been repeated strategically to help you identify and keep track of progression through the discussion. I've also used the same size, shape, and color for each element's title slide. The color choices provide sufficient contrast to meet accessibility guidelines and online materials. Font sizes are large enough and the font type used is consistent. In the development of instruction element of the MRK model, you begin to bring together the various components and to produce the instructional materials for use by the learner. This may include video or audio recordings, educational resources, web pages, and interactive materials. A few of the tools I use to develop this instructional video are a computer, PowerPoint, various websites, Camtasia, and a headset with a microphone. The end result is the video you are watching now. This brings us to the ninth and final inner element of the MRK design model, creation of assessments and evaluation instruments. Your learners will be evaluated against the objectives using the instruments you design at this step. Let's pause here and check your learning about the MRK model so far. In a moment, I'll show you the MRK diagram. How many of the 9 inner elements can you recall? Remember, order doesn't matter. Try to recall as many of the MRK design elements as you can in the next 5 seconds. Ready? Here are your answers. How did you do? Don't sweat it if you didn't get them all. The model is easily accessible to use as a handy tool should you choose to. Now let's turn our attention to the outer rings of the MRK model in our last few moments together. The morrison-ross-kemp design is different from many other ID models because of the elements in these outer rings. Considerations for the overall planning and management of instructional design projects should be made in order to meet the client expectations regarding schedule and budget. Decisions may dictate how much time and effort is spent on each of the 9 elements of the design process. Planning for implementation or rollout of the instructional product should be carefully considered. Good planning early in the process can make the implementation process as smooth as possible. Support services may vary from project to project based on the amount of resources available. Support consideration should include the number of people working on the project as well as the skills or qualifications of the team members. Evaluation of the design and development work throughout the process will likely lead to revisions along the way. This formative evaluation process adds to the iterative, cyclical nature of the MRK model. Summative evaluation should be used to determine program effectiveness after instruction has been implemented. There are usually two situations that warrant confirmative evaluation processes: learner-oriented and context-oriented. Learner-oriented situations consider how well learners retain skills and their knowledge over time. Context-oriented situations consider how relevant the instructional product stays over time as conditions in the environment continue to change. The MRK ID model is based upon four fundamental and interrelated components: learners, objectives, methods, and evaluation. MRK, however, expands upon the four fundamentals and includes 9 distinct elements as pictured in the center of the diagram. Each of these elements is independent of the other. It may be completed in any order and at any time during the ID process. Surrounding the 9 elements are 8 ongoing processes. Closest to the individual elements are assessment-related processes such as formative and summative evaluation and revision. The additional processes of planning, implementation, project management, and support services surround the entire framework. The resulting visual diagram depicts a circular and continuous arrangement. It represents flexibility and adaptability, and it gives designers the freedom to adapt the model to diverse contexts while still producing an effective product.